Everyone, Ryan Young, Kjj Jiu Jitsu. Hope you're doing well. All right, so somebody had asked me if I could do a video on the history of Jiu Jitsu from our perspective versus current. And all I can say is this, anybody who started Jiu Jitsu prior to, say, the year 2000, the thinking is that Jiu Jitsu started off as a self-defense art. And when I say self-defense, I really mean a fighting art, because I guess it was kind of code word for, I'm not going to be a dick and pick fights, which I know a lot of people that did that back in the early days, because being a blue belt in Jiu Jitsu was almost like a superpower, and being a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu was, God tier, as they say, because once you got to purple belt, knowing what everybody else knew, it was very hard to beat someone. So what guys would do is they'd go to clubs, right? Where else do young men go to? They'll go to clubs and they'll find a way to pick a fight, take it outside, and then do their business. But that's kind of like what we were raised in. That's what jiu-jitsu was. I've said videos about how when I was a white or blue belt, I still remember Helson Gracie, Grandmaster Helson now, would give out stripes to people who got into a street fight and used jiu-jitsu to overcome their opponent. Didn't ask who started it or anything like that. It was just like, oh, have a good job, let me get tape and wrap around your belt, right? But there were tournaments, not in the U.S. when I started. Tournaments in the U.S. didn't start until probably 92. I want to say middle of 92. It was after I left Hawaii and moved to California, but it was shortly after. Helson, I think, did the first jiu-jitsu tournament in the U.S. And then when I was in California, we had a Hickson Academy versus Gracie Torrance tournament. The first Pan Ams I participated in, it was in Redondo Beach, California. And there was a Hickson versus Machado tournament that I had participated in as well. So there were tournaments. There weren't that many. I'd say on average, you're looking at maybe 2 a year. And then it started to accelerate past the year 2000. Joe Moreira and Kleber Luciano were very big in doing tournaments, especially Joe Moreira. And it was humble beginnings, and then it grew over time because people wanted to compete. So now, what's the difference between then versus now? Well, when I started, jiu-jitsu was a fighting art, as I mentioned, and we did tournaments to compare how we do versus other jiu-jitsu schools. It would be Vale Tudo and jiu-jitsu with the gi on during most of the year, and then when we had a tournament coming up 30 days prior, we'd, depending if it were a gi or no gi tournament, we would then start to think about tournament rules and what you cannot do. And what we did was we made the original violent version of jiu-jitsu sportive, meaning we took out a lot of the stuff that you wouldn't, I guess that you would do in the academy. You'd leave that in there, but you wouldn't do that, the fight stuff in a tournament, so to speak. You wouldn't try to hit anybody. We did slam, though, because slams were legal back then, and we were pretty disappointed when they got rid of slams, because, especially as an instructor, the bad thing about slams, obviously, is people get hurt. But also, the good thing about slams is that it keeps you in a self-defense mindset, and you don't let yourself get to a position where you're picked up and can be slammed, because it is the dumbest thing in the world. And I'll repeat it. I'll keep saying it till my face turns blue. It is the dumbest thing to hold guard when somebody picks you up, thinking that, oh, okay, he's not going to slam me because it's illegal to slam me. Okay, it is. Why is it illegal? Because it's violent, and today's jiu-jitsu is no longer violent. Now, you can put a submission on somebody, and once you have it, and once you have your opponent so he can't move, and you can put all your leverage against one limb, then yes, you can be violent about it, and you could rip the submission, right? That's truly a dick move. When you have your opponent dead to rights, so to speak, and you just go and rip his arm off. I mean, why do that, right? But that's not really what happens today in tournaments. Like I said, tournaments are very civilized. Jiu-Jitsu today is much more civilized than it used to be. Once the sports side started to grow, once schools started to pop up, and what they would do is just have their students compete and have them compete from very young ages, very low levels, then yeah, you need to put in all the safeguards so that more and more people enjoy the experience of competing. But when you do that and everybody's now doing it across the board, that changes jiu-jitsu. It's still jiu-jitsu, so to speak, but it's now a sport. So today's jiu-jitsu is not self-defense that becomes sportive for the sake of doing a competition. It is now a sport, and it's sportive, and it's sport through and through, because so many of the rules that go through tournaments now they have nothing to do with protecting yourself in a real fight. Like the half guard game, for instance, right? The half guard game, and many of you know, I mean, that doesn't mean that we don't play it. We do play the half guard game, and we do have people that are very good at the half guard game. But the half guard game is a pure sport game. Or when you underhook the leg, right? When you're trying to do, we call it T-sweep, but some call it pendulum sweep, some call it flower sweep. But when you put your arm in there, or when you try to set up an armbar from guard and you reach your arm in there, that's a sport thing. You don't do that in a fight. Somebody knows what they're doing, and as soon as you hook your arm in the leg, they sit on your leg and your arm is stuck. And then now you can't defend yourself with that arm because it's now tied up in there. So what we try to do is we just teach jiu-jitsu in the traditional way that we were taught jiu-jitsu, which is jiu-jitsu is self-defense first, it's sport second. Whereas if you're at a school that does it in a sport way, you have to cross-train. You have to do the Muay Thai, the kickboxing, the boxing, because just plain grappling, and especially grappling, when you willingly go onto your back and you play guard, right? That's another thing. The difference between sport jiu-jitsu and historical jiu-jitsu is you played guard because you had no choice. You didn't willingly go into guard and play guard. You went to guard because your opponent was much bigger and much stronger than you, and you had no alternative but to play guard and develop the guard game. But in a sport, in a competition, there's no way they're going to stomp you, kick you, headbutt you, and all that. So you can willingly go to guard and not really expect any kind of danger. So that's why you've seen the proliferation of guard playing, because if there are rules involved and there's no necessarily violence with regard to playing guard, you're going to play guard. On the other hand, if you know that in guard your opponent will try to slam you, will try to pick you up off the ground, will try to headbutt you, punch you, spear you with his head, you're not going to play guard, and you're going to try to get up on top. One of the things that I can kind of think of is when I started jiu-jitsu, I played guard a lot. And a lot of it was because I really didn't have the ability to start from top, because everybody was bigger than me, right? I'm about 170 pounds now, but I'm 56 years old. But when I was 21 when I started, I was $130 maybe, with the gi on, right? Same height, right? But I was a lot thinner, and I really had no ability to fight anybody except from my back. I had to learn how to get really good fighting from my back so that I could eventually sweep and get on top and be able to play on top. It took me years to be able to play and to develop a top game, because every time I would practice it, but I couldn't really develop it, because when we'd spar, I'd never get on top. I'd have to fight from the bottom. And when I did get up on top, it was so infrequent that I got on top that I had no real base. So I'd end up playing for my back again. So as a consequence, smaller guys like me, we had to develop a guard game. But I didn't want to play there. That wasn't my choice. Whereas today, it's all, you got guys who specialize in playing guards. I mean, they have entries to knee bars, heel hooks. From there, they can sweep you 80 different ways, all from guard, which is why you'll see guys jump guard. You'll see two guys going butt scoot toward each other, and it's kind of laughable. It cracks me up. But it's today's jiu-jitsu. So in that sense, I don't really, it's whatever it is, But if you're going to do jiu-jitsu, just know that there really are a couple of different versions of it. And to keep it simple, you have the sport version and the original self-defense version. The sport version today, I would say, is by far the more popular version of jiu-jitsu. And that's the one they put their little kids in, and because it's kind of like an alternative to karate, taekwondo, right? Even judo's gone very watered down from what it used to be. When my son started jiu-jitsu, he's 24 now, but when he was 7, when I got him started in judo, because I wanted him to learn to play that game, because this was back in like 2010. I know jiu-jitsu had transitioned to being a sport. So my thought was, have him learn judo first, have him learn not to be afraid of getting thrown, and have him practice throwing people, learning the off balance, the kazushi, all that stuff, and the movement, so that it would translate to giving him a more complete game in his jiu-jitsu. And thankfully, I've got a couple of students that are doing that right now. They're going to learn judo, because I've said many times, if we could take today's jiu-jitsu and combine it with today's judo, then you'd have a close resemblance, however you want to put it, to the original Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? Or you could just simply teach it the way we teach it here at Common Jiu-Jitsu. So really the difference is between whether or not it's a sport or not. Now, does that mean that people who do it as a sport cannot do well in self-defense? No, of course they can. Especially if they round out their ground game, which is what jiu-jitsu is for most people today. They round it out with something like a judo or boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, right? And even wrestling, it's a sport. It's a great sport. It's a takedown sport, just like judo is. There's no submissions, so to speak, in wrestling. But if you can pick somebody up and throw them on the ground, that's pretty good. That'll stop most people. Which is why even in high school, nobody messes with wrestlers, only because nobody wants to be put on their head, which a lot of wrestlers can and will do. I remember once when I was a kid, in middle school, there was this one high schooler who I looked up to. He was a state champion level wrestler, and I remember him getting into a fight. I think it was at our carnival. We had an annual carnival every year. It was a big one, big one in the state of Hawaii. And some dude from outside of our school, we didn't know him, picked a fight with him, and he literally just picked the guy up, slammed him, and then the guy got back up. He picked him up and slammed him another way. Picked him up, slammed him. So after about 3 or 4 slams, the guy couldn't fight anymore, and the fight was over, right? All without throwing a punch. And that's a very valuable skill to have. And so that way, sport people, people who do a grappling art for sport, they certainly can win in a self-defense situation. Now, if you take wrestling and add the catch wrestling to it, that's a different animal now. And that's pretty cool too. That's kind of like submission grappling today. So the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu side of it, you look at the old Valley Tudo fights, some of them you can find on video. I think I remember Half was in one, Henzo was in one. They had that night when you had 3 of them that fought. You had Murilo Bustamante, Fabio Gurgel, and Valich, right? That was kind of how it was. Or you look at the old Hickson Zulu fight, all the Valley Tudo in Japan fights that Hickson was in. That's as close as you can get to a street fight and have it be entertainment, right? Whereas actual street fights, they're violent, they're quick, they're done in, inside of 30 seconds. It's a different animal altogether. But I contend that the original Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is one of the better ways to prepare you for that, especially if it goes to the ground. If it doesn't go to the ground, then, it's not to say that a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guy cannot fight from his feet. Now, he's not going to fight in the traditional way that, say, a boxer or a kickboxer would. You know, they'd be into the clinch. You got dirty boxing like Randy Couture used to do. You got headbutts. You got stomps. You got all kind of stuff that a traditional Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioner will do. Will a sport Jiu-Jitsu fighter do that? Think about that? I don't know. If they're thinking of it in terms of points and hold position and, you know, like a lot of schools would do, then probably not, because their mind gets wired to do stuff for points, not for, you know, for breaking something, you know, for lack of a better term. You know, I'm not trying to espouse violence, right? I'm just telling you that in a fight, you know, fights are violent. They're you know, that's by nature. Whereas modern jiu-jitsu today is not violent. It's, you know, it's dangerous, but it's not violent. You know, football is dangerous. Is it violent? Sometimes. You know, if you notice a lot of the rules and stuff in the NFL and in college football now, they're trying to take the violence out of football, making it less exciting, unfortunately, right? I wish it could be exciting without being violent, right? Like they have targeting now. You know, if you can't, you know, take out somebody's, you know, leg, which I know a lot of days, in the old days, you'd have guys that would be just gunning for knees, you know, especially on offensive linemen. You know, defensive linemen would be shooting their shoulders or their helmet toward an offensive lineman's knees. They're looking to take them out. I know that the ex-Dallas Cowboys football, was it New Orleans coach? He was a Dallas Cowboys assistant. I can't remember what his name was. He was suspended for a year because his linebackers were targeting people, you know, for what that means. I mean, you know, it's just, I don't know. Was it that, you know, he says, hey, I want you to focus on this guy and I want you to hit him so hard that he can't play anymore? Is that targeting? I don't know. I guess. But, you know, even football has gotten less violent. You know, society in general, in our sports and our entertainment forms, have gotten less violent. And, you know, I think that's a good thing, but it does kind of take some of the interest out for some people, which is why the UFC is so popular, because it's violence, right? Boxing is popular, but not nearly as popular as the UFC, because boxing, you know, it's just, you know, that you punch, right? Which, you know, just punching somebody in the head, that can be pretty violent, right? Especially when their hands are taped up so they can throw harder, and they got gloves so they can throw even harder. You know, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's why boxing is still popular after well over 100 years of being one of the mainstream sports or entertainment for especially Americans, right? And Europeans, they like boxing too. But the UFC more so because you can do other stuff. It's not just, you know, that one set of rules where all you can do is punch. People like to see, you know, chokes. People like to see, you know, kicks, all that kind of stuff. But even in the UFC, if you hit a guy in the nuts, you know, they'll stop it, you know, and let the guy rest or whatever. Whereas back in the old Vale Tudo days, you punch him in the nuts. You know, that's a fight. You know, you have to protect it. But in the UFC, you don't necessarily have to train to protect your jewels, because it's illegal for them to hit them. You don't have to, you know, train to protect your eyes, you know, because an eye poke is accidental. Whereas you look at Yuki Nakai, right? He's, you know, for those of you who are younger, you won't know who he is. But Yuki Nakai is a guy about my size. He was in Japan. He was, I guess he was a wrestler, and he started doing Vale Tudo. They started with Japan Vale Tudo. One of the events that Hickson was in, where it was a three fight win. You know, it was what do you call it? It's like a tournament style. And Yuki Nakai's very first fight, there were no weight classes in there as well. His first fight was against this French savate fighter named Gerard Gordeau. Hoist fought him too. Gerard Gordeau, people call him a dirty fighter, but he was a fighter. I mean, he was violent, and he didn't care. He wanted to win. So when he fought with Hoist, for instance, in the first Ultimate Fighting Championship, before it was called the UFC, first or second one, he bit Hoist. You know, when Hoist was mounted on him, he bit Hoist in the chest or something like that. So Hoist just kind of looked up at the ref and said, he bit me. And, you know, they didn't stop the fight. They kept it going. It was just, you know, he's not supposed to fight, not supposed to bite, but he did it anyway. So Hoist, you know, turned him over, rear naked choke, and just held it and made him tap, 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 tap. And, you know, basically made him pay for it in that way. Now, going back to Yuki Nakai got his eye gouged, he got thumbed in the eye. He was trying to do a knee bar or a heel hook on Gordeau, who was standing and was just raining down punches on him, and then, punched like this and stuck his thumb in his eye, basically blinded him. So yes, Yuki Nakai is blinded in one eye. Well, because of that, he was blinded, but the fight didn't end. It kept going, right? And thankfully for Yuki, he was good enough and game enough where he fought Gary Goodridge, as they call him, Big Daddy or whatever, and he ended up, I think he armbarred him. Now, big size difference, over 100-pound difference. But he fought him, and then he finally ended up fighting Rickson, and luckily for Yuki, Rickson had no plans to exploit his eye. Instead, he fought with him like the way that Rickson would fight with us in the academy, where he would smash us, he'd beat us position-wise, but he maybe only hit Yuki once or twice, and I think the time that he hit him was just to get him to turn over so he could choke him. But even in Rickson's locker room, Royler's brother, is saying, you need to punch his eye, and Rickson's saying, I'm not going to do that, right? He goes, I don't need to do that, right? Now, I guess if Yuki was better than Rickson, would Rickson do it? I don't know, right? I think Rickson looked at it kind of as an honor thing, and it was in bad honor for him to go after the eye, especially when he didn't need to. Now, if he needed to, who knows? But in retrospect, he didn't need to. But the thing is, though, that was a violent fight where the opponent for Yuki went for his eye, poked his eye, damaged his eye, and the fight went on. Right? Whereas today's MMA, no, poke the eye, they stop the fight, and, it's never a good thing when a guy gets his eye poked, because even though they're game and they keep going and they fight, they almost always lose, right? Same with the guy who gets kicked in the nuts, right? They stop and he gets to think about it and stuff, and, they start up again. He goes, yeah, I'm good. They start up again, and he usually loses. It's a dirty way to win given the rules set, but fight's a fight, right? But then you can contend, well, if that's the case, the UFC is not really a fight. It's a sport. It's a violent sport, yes, but is it a fight? No, because there's safety protocols that are put in there. And even in the old Vale Tudo fights the Gracies did, it was more of a gentleman's agreement, right? No biting, no eye gouging, no groin pinches. But that stuff happened, right? So, and when it did happen, did they stop the fight? No, they just said, hey, don't do that. And okay, go back and fight. Right? There's no 5-minute rule, rest, or anything like that. It was just, hey, the ref would be there, slap his hand away, stop trying to poke his eye, and then, but that would be it. So, long video, but that's kind of a long story as to the difference between traditional Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and modern Jiu-Jitsu. It really comes down to the mentality. A lot of the concepts are the same, but the mentality is very different. So I hope that helped you kind of get a little mindset shift on the history of Jiu-Jitsu and what Jiu-Jitsu really is. And that can maybe give you an idea on what you want going forward as far as you're choosing the type of Jiu-Jitsu you want to train for yourself, right? If it's, we don't live in a super violent society, at least I don't. So do I really need it for self-defense? No. It's good that I know it. I'm happy that I know it, and I teach it that way. But, and there are going to be people who are going to get into fights, because I do have students that have had to use Jiu-Jitsu to get themselves out of a confrontation on the street. Anyway, you can come visit us at one of our 2 academies, Kjj Jiu-Jitsu Irvine, which is in Laguna Hills, Kjj Jiu-Jitsu Dallas Fort Worth, which is in Flower Mound, Texas. You can also visit us at Kjj Jiu-Jitsu online, kjjiu-jitsu.com, and you can also access our online content through the website as well. Just sign up for it. And if you need or you want personal coaching, you want to do a conference call with me, just go ahead and click my Clarity link. If it's not there, it's claritylink.co/Ryan Young. Anyway, that is all I have for you. Oh, and I have another channel on YouTube. It's a brand new channel. I've got about 10 videos up on there now, and it's more about mindset things, and I really put it together to leave a legacy for my children. So once I'm gone, if YouTube's still around, they can always pull it up and they can get advice from Dad. But I put it on there for YouTube for you as well. So go ahead and check it out. The link should be below. It's called, I think, To My Younger Self. But anyway, I think you'll find some interesting topics in there, non-jiu-jitsu related, but there may be a reference here or there to jiu-jitsu. But I want to thank you for watching this. If you stayed all the way through, please put a thumbs up or hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, because only about 20% of people who view our videos are subscribers. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Take care and happy training. Bye now.